Okay.
I like it. All right, so I'm pretty excited about this topic for multiple reasons. I just finished year 20 at Harrisburg Christian Church, and I do want to be a pastor who has longevity, and I do want to be a pastor who finishes well. So I think these two pieces that Rod's talking about are going to help me with that. And he has coached me on these at significant times in my life. Like, John, your life would be better if you would do something like this. So I do. If you came to my office today, up on the bulletin board is a schedule that looks just like this. I've divided it into blocks, and you're going to be talking about this. But one of the things that's been most helpful to me is to know when I'm off. Because sometimes it's you kind of am I on duty or am I off duty, and it's hard to know ministry wise. And if you look at Wednesday has flex in both these two squares, and I know that I don't feel guilty going golfing with Alex yesterday, even though my back pulled. So that's one of the reasons I'm excited about this. The other is when I'd heard the word sabbatical, in my mind, and I don't know, I can't remember why I thought this, but in my mind, the only people I knew that had been on a sabbatical had been like burned out. They went on a sabbatical and they came back from the sabbatical and resigned. And I don't know if that happened once or twice in my life or whatever, but that was my only impression of a sabbatical. Rod introduced the idea of sabbatical to me. I shared the idea with our board, and they jumped on board with it, gave me a sabbatical several years ago. I was able to do a project that I'd really wanted to do, which was fun for me. And the board liked the idea enough. They thought, well, we just need to get this, because Michael, I think I'd been there 14 years or something at the time. And they said, well, we need to get this in the Constitution. So this is just a part of our staff rotation. So anyway, I've benefited from this stuff, and I'm excited that you're going to share this.
All right, thank you.
Jump
Thank you,
in.
John. So let me start with this. We're going to do this in two parts: sabbatical and then weekly schedules, weekly and annual schedules. The first one is that as it relates to sabbaticals, I want to deal right up front with the most common objection that I hear both when we were tackling this in our own past, as well as internally within staff, including a staff I consulted this past fall. And it goes like this: I don't get a sabbatical at my job. And I just want to address that in three ways. Number one is, well, maybe you should. And so I have a file over here, and it's pretty thick about sabbaticals. And one of the things that in my own research and making a case for them some 20 years ago was that there's actually law firms in New York City in which they insist on sabbaticals for their attorneys, because when they go spend time elsewhere in a kind of internship kind of way, then again, they're working, etc., and they benefit and they come back with new and fresh ideas. So perhaps the world would be better off if we actually sort of, rather than just reacting to that objection, I don't get a sabbatical. Well, maybe your company would be better off if you found rhythms, as I called it in the subtitle, rhythms of rest that eat burnout for breakfast. And so how could we all benefit from promoting the kind of rest and sabbatical that I know many of you represent and care about? The second thing I'd say to that objection is that every vocation has its own benefits and drawbacks. And so this is why I responded so strongly when this was brought up from a staff member within this consultation, where they said, well, me and my wife, talk about it. And we say, well, if you compare yourself to the work of again, very respectfully, nothing meant pejoratively, of course, but if you compare yourself to the work of those who are in the plumbing business or who work in an office building, and that's the grid that you think through, I just don't know how we are going to last long term. So my credibility here today is not, from my perspective, about institutional health. That's not what it's about. my credibility is about that I'm 64, have been in ministry since I was in the parsonage, and I'm not yet bitter. So that's where I think, oh, okay, so this is something that I can talk about and navigating the vocational realities of how to create rhythms that are healthy for me personally, that might be ways in which you find your own style along the way. So, yeah, so every vocation has its benefits and it has its own drawbacks. And so obviously, if we're talking about education, they do have sabbaticals. So those of us who work in the tools of the mind, etc. So I think you get that. And so therefore we have to find rhythms in which are unique to us. And I'm going to share in our weekly schedule things of those, but specifically as to sabbatical, it seems to me that in some neighborhood of 5 to 7 years, that we have a period that we step away. The last thing I'd say about this is that it's often helpful to just reframe it in terms of, I'm going to take a study break. And so if people are unable to wrap their mind around, in other words, we can't insist on being understood by everyone in the congregation, then a way in which we're able to say to them, yeah, I need to get away and do some particular. So I found the word, substituting the word study break, which just became, oh, okay, well, I get that. You need to study, even though I'm going to Florida for a time of it. Okay, so here's some tips and takeaways, sabbaticals. The first thing I want to say is that we have had enough individuals around here who have participated in these, including myself, and several of them have given me their templates. And so when and if you're preparing or planning, happy to sit with you and let you see what they've done and what their plan looks like. So that would include Pastor Gilman and others. And so it's helpful to, first of all, just make a plan. So these are my tips and takeaways. Make a plan, don't overplan. In other words, don't overcommit, just say, and let me give you what would be in that plan, my suggestions. First of all, a topic you're going to study or two, a vacation you're going to take or two, a project that you might work on, and finally, just state plainly, I'm going to breathe and do what I want to do. You may not add the do what I want to do, but in other words, just get bored. And so therefore, in terms of addressing this with whoever your accountability, your supervisor, the elders, the deacons, whatever it is that you're trying to make the case for, is that it's reasonable for you to have a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that says, here's how I'm intending to navigate these next, which leads to number 3. And I suggest a 6, 8, and 10 week options. So 6, 8, and 10 week options. And I think this is directly related to longevity in some ways. So again, these are just tools, just principles, just tips. But in some way, a minimum of 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. And if it's more, then that's great. But a 6 weeks seems appropriate to me if you've been there 5 years and, if you're on year whatever, then 25, 30, then to take a good 8 or 10 weeks to get away might be what is needed in order to support and to manage your longevity. The next one is just, and several of us in the room that I'm looking at have had these, and those are unwanted sabbaticals. So for one reason or another, either a crisis or a car wreck or a transition in ministry or a timeout that we were given, we have these unwanted sabbaticals. And again, I think because I had taken a couple of sabbaticals, when I experienced my unwanted one in 2015, I was more prepared to know what to do with it. I had had some practice about it. And so therefore I was able to have a perspective that again included, okay, let me think about the topic. Let me think about, in that case, some extended counseling that I engaged in. Let me think about just being bored and walking and navigating, who am I as a person in the process that I think is helpful. And then the question becomes, well, then what is expected when I come back in terms of what I should present? And again, I'll show you mine and the template of others. But you keep a journal, and basically it's just a paragraph or two on virtually 5 or 6 days of the week. Or perhaps you take 3 or 4 days at a time, or even a week, might be then a little longer. But you just keep a journal that says, today I got up and stared at the sunrise. Then I grabbed the resource that I'm reading and I spent time in chapter 5. And this is a reflection that I have in one sentence. That kind of thing, just keep a journal. So when you bring that back from your plan, then you would hand that, as I did, to my supervisor, and then an explanation to the board that just basically said, here's how I spent my time. So again, doesn't need to be wordy, needs to be, appropriate to however you process. But I think to bring back a journal that says, here's what got accomplished, and to use it. In fact, I remember presenting it even at a midweek worship experience where in the midweek, I took some time and said, as did other staff, and said, here's how I benefited. Here's some things that happened in me as a result. So, yeah, Pastor John, anything to
That's a
add?
back thing. It wasn't a move. It wasn't a move thing.
I got you.
Um,
Anything you want to add?
Are
to that?
you, well, are you willing to share about your upcoming sabbatical plan?
Yeah, thank you. And so I had an interesting experience here not long ago where I was with our TEI board, and I said to them, I don't really think I need one in this season of my life. My pace is feels reasonable. My workload is different. Not sure what I would do. And then there's somebody in the room who I won't name, who John then said to me in front of the group, of which they agreed with, is, when I said that to you a couple of years ago, you said to me, well, you should probably just take one anyway, just to see. So from mid-September and through essentially the Evangelical Theological Society, which is through Thanksgiving. And yeah, Julie and I are already wrapping our mind around what it's going to mean in order for us to pull away, and already giving away responsibilities related to things that need to be kept up here, and thinking through that. And again, do I need it? I don't know. So, but people who I've made accountable are making me accountable to it. So yeah, in the fall.
Is there a project or anything like, there's some vacation in there, topic, vacation, project, anything that you've put together yet? Or are you still in that process?
It is, in fact, it's very relevant to me, so I won't again belabor it, though I'm excited about it. But there is 2 publishing resources that I have in mind, and one of them are called Homiletical Hacks for Better Preaching. Some of these chapters have been published already, and others of them are written, and others of them are yet to be written. And so I want to ensure that those, and there's my doctoral project that I've never gotten into any kind of a form, whether that's self-publishing, etc., but that I've cared about. So I want to wrap my mind around that project, those projects, and the thought of the sabbatical, and I'm hinting at something that we're coming to, but the thought of a sabbatical has already moved me in the direction of contacting development editors who can help me get that done.
Yeah.
So I've Yeah, so just the very thought of that project in the future has already had movement along the way.
If, I think several churches are already supportive of this. If you're a staff person like myself several years ago and you're introducing this and you don't have that supportive group and you're sensing that pushback. I know you mentioned a little bit earlier, any tips on how hard to push for this or what angle to take when you're talking to maybe a skeptical board congregation or group of leaders that you had to get approval from?
Right. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from others in the room about how they may have navigated their own. And so I think we seek to be as persuasive as possible. And at the same time, I think there's a sense in which what we experienced back in the day is this is one of those that runs into my 25 principles for a healthier corporate culture. And that is the one in which we have to demand our way with an offer of our resignation. So there's a sense in which we say, I'm trying to stay proactive in terms of navigating my bitterness quotient, as I call it. And again, I hope you hear the humor in that, but it's real, but I'm also I am on the precipice of resentment, and is this sustainable? And I've never wanted to be the person that says, can't wait to retire. I'm not that kind of person. I want to do this for the long haul. This is who I am. This is my calling. If I get to do what I love, but I have to do it at a pace. And the pace and the demand of the work insists on me having some time off. So what occurs to me when you ask is, this is one of those where I would say, this has to get done, and it has that level of threat to it. I'm not asking you to understand my vocation, but I'm with people who understand my vocation. I'm happy to bring them in and talk with you about it. But I'm not special. Every vocation, law enforcement, they have a hard job, a really hard job. Professors, they have a hard job. Moms have a hard job, and everybody has to figure out how to do that without going over the precipice of bitterness. Now, of course, I've always wanted to work with hard workers. I've always cared about being a person, So hopefully we don't have to try to put a charge under somebody, and we're encouraging them to rest. So that's in the backdrop of what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's the kind of thing that I would say this has to be the case.
And it's not just a vacation, because there is a project behind it. And I think that was helpful. I had a very supportive group of leaders that helped with mine. But anyway, I think that was part of it too.
Right. It's not just it's a steady break. I think that's why that comes in handy.
Right.
We're going to include rest and rhythm, hearing from God, as we were noting earlier, giving some space. And we don't know what we need to hear until we get out of systems and reconnect. And I think, again, that's the wisdom of saying to me, hey, why don't you go away and try it and see what happens? And that's what I mean by don't overplan, of course, too, because you might just need to take a long nap for a while before you even know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And so to transition to this, you said you felt like you didn't really need a sabbatical right now.
That's
You
right.
must be in a pretty good rhythm right now, Rod. Tell us about more of a weekly rhythm and how you built that into your.
When I was about 30 years of age, I was participating I had been adopted for a season by what was then called the Baptist General Conference, now called Converge. And the Iowa district adopted me. And in one of those weekends where I went up to visit with other church planters at that time, Pastor Tom from First Federated Church was sat with us in the evening. And what I'm about to say to you, he said, by and large, and it then resonated deeply with me. And it was my practice, full tilt, for an ideal week for the better part of those 20+ years that I was in full-time vocational ministry. But the vestiges and much of it still resides in my schedule today. And so here's what Pastor Tom said to me some 30+ years ago. And if these little tips and tricks and bullet points that I'm about to share are helpful to you, then you can apply them and we can have further conversation here in a bit about it. The first bullet point is replenishing, deplenishing, and flex days. Replenishing, deplenishing, and flex days. And what he said is, I like to put harder days, a couple of 3 days a week, and then a couple of days have greater levels of neutrality or replenishing, and another day has a kind of flexibility to it. And it all of a sudden just deeply resonated with me and what he was. So for me, every Wednesday and Thursday could, when I was working, perhaps could be argued more hours than I should have. But I try not to judge that season in light of the present, because I enjoy the benefits of the credibility that were gained in those seasons. Now, that was a lot. I won't stay there, but we can always say, well, I shouldn't have, and yet I enjoy the benefits, as does my family, of the sacrifices that got made during that season. So you prove yourself to be a hard worker. If you're in a ministry for the first 6 months and it's really hard and you're miserable and you're not creating rhythms of rest, I'm not as empathetic to that. If we're in year 6 or 16, then we have to find better rhythms because we show ourselves to be hard workers. But here's what I mean. Every Wednesday and Thursday for me, again, these are not laws, principles. This is just helpful that I'm sharing with you. Is Wednesdays and Thursdays could become 12 and 14 and 16-hour days. That's the way I liked it. So I could be gone from early until late. I had permission to not come home at 5:30 to have dinner on those nights. Now, as soon as I say that, that could not be every day. Therefore, there's other benefits that my wife or me got out of it. And those became my Tuesday, for example. So my Tuesday was a flex day. I spent the early morning in my world, of study and reading of things like Christianity Today magazine, a book that I was usually an academic book, and I would spend several hours on a Tuesday morning doing that in an ideal week. I would often connect in a season with my wife, Julie, to discuss our schedule. For example, she would stop by Panera Bread on iPhone at that point, and we would go over, hey, what's the week look like? And after that, I typically then, and this is still true today, all my dentist appointments, all my doctor's appointments, if at all possible, always show up on Tuesday. And if not Tuesday, they have to be on Friday, because those are flex days. What has to get done in order for me to be prepared for Wednesday and Thursday? In my schedule, this goes to bullet point number 2. In my world, it was 6 days. I worked 6 days. 2 of those were kind of half days. They had flex days. They had longer days. And so therefore, 6 days, and then truly a Sabbath day. And so bullet point 2, 6 days and a Sabbath day. So when I was in seminary, Don Sanukian, who has been a distant mentor of mine in homiletics, etc., said to us during my orientation a phrase that has stayed with me and that's been my practice. And other than marrying well, I think if I am able to turn 73 and still be the life of the Kingdom Party, it's because of this. Beyond marrying well, it's because I have consistently respected 1 day a week, even in the crux of the hardest ministry, almost without exception, 24 hours. Of course, I had kids. Sometimes I had to take care of because my wife was working part-time. Sometimes I had to, of course, it engages with my wife and my kids in various seasons. But for 24 hours, I basically resigned from the church and the work that I was doing. And I would get up of a day and say, what could I/we do today to recreate? What do I want to do? If I throw the God card in, what did God want to do? Then all of a sudden I'm into my moralism and legalism of my two fundamentalist past. And so I have to just say, what do I want to do? Jesus, what do we want to do today? So 6 days in a Sabbath day, replenishing days, meaning Monday. So let's just go to that. Again, I'm talking about you have to apply it yourself. But Monday was a kind of an 8-hour day for us, typically related to staff meetings, programming meetings. The reason I liked Mondays as a staff day was because you're not taking Monday off, because why give yourself your most tired day after Sunday? So I actually, if you're a preaching pastor, I actually prefer that you take Tuesday as your day off. If you're an associate and want to cover for your senior pastor, you take a Friday off instead. But then Mondays were, ways in which we could all connect as a staff, and we give each other the not so good days. Wednesday and Thursday then become full on days. Saturdays and Sundays have their own reality. The wedding, like I'm going to do this weekend, still, that's a reality. Yeah, so I'm trying to stay in the past rather than the present, because I actually take Mondays now because my reality is different than it used to be. So that shows a kind of flexibility. 6 days and Sabbath day. Bullet point number 3, block scheduling. Block scheduling. This is what Pastor Tom said that was so helpful. He said, now, I am happy to meet with you. Happy to meet with you. I can even accommodate evenings. I can accommodate after work. I can do that on Monday. I can do that on Wednesday for a slot, and I can do that on Thursday through the evening until 7. So in other words, I have these 5 slots for me. I have these 5 appointments available. Well, I can't meet on those days, Pastor. So let me go to helpful phrases. Okay, so this is a side note. This is a pause for a moment. Let me give you these that I've learned through the first one is, oh, I'm sorry, I'm scheduled. Pastor, I'd really like you to come to my birthday party. It's on Friday night, and we're going to have a really good time. I know you'll like to be there because 3 of the other staff are going to be there. And you're such great friends with them, right? Meaning that's what they think. Well, I didn't pick them. We worked together all week. I love them, but that didn't help. And I would just simply have to say, oh, regrettably, I'm scheduled on Friday. Now, if they say why, then you go to the next one. Well, I've already made a commitment to the Lord and to my spouse, or whatever it is. So in other words, we don't have to give a reason, and they're not going to understand any more than the sabbatical piece of it, or the study break that we're taking. So if we insist on them getting us, that's for us to process with friends and a counselor. But I'm scheduled. I'm sorry. I can't. Yeah, the only thing I'd add about, I guess I'll go ahead and say, is that if I ever showed up back in the day on a Friday for an event that you planned, you can bet I wanted to be there so you could feel flattered. Because the default was, yeah, I don't do that on my day off. That's what I mean by it. And therefore, to teach people how to teach us, that's not bad. And write that down. To teach people how to treat us, is to say, if you do intend for me to come, you need to be aware of my schedule and the ways in which I can accommodate, which leads to the second helpful phrase. I can't do that, but what I can do is, right? So I wish I'd learned that one sooner. I can't do that. You've asked me to do something I can't do, but what I can do is. And so we're always looking for ways that we can do what we can do. But what we can't do is ways that, again, in an ideal week, which there's not a lot of ideal weeks, but because there's funerals that pop up, of course, so I'm not insensitive to those. But if I can get them to move the funeral, if I can say firmly enough, hey, I wish you'd have contacted me first because I simply could do it on Saturday. Is that at all an option? But I have to also be a player in that. And then the third one is the word regrettably and unfortunately. So regrettably, I'm not able to do that. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to meet that expectation. And then, but what I can do is back to the bullet points. This was a really helpful thing Tom said. I practice it, and that is Pastor Tom said, hey, guys, gals, 3 evenings working. Most of us work when other people are off. 3 evenings home. And 4 out if it includes your family. So therefore, that's why I cannot do anything on Sunday evening, anything, okay, qualified. But in terms of protecting my weekly schedule, I can't do anything on Sunday night. I can't do anything on Friday night. I can't do anything on Monday night. What I can do is I could do a Thursday evening. I could do, okay, so you're picking up that. So 3 evenings out, 3 home. So that's the trade-off. If my wife says to me, hey, I really need us to get this project done, the car's broke, whatever, on Tuesday afternoon, you can count on me. You see, that's the way in which a flex day works. If it's not scheduled, I'm able to accommodate that in my flex scheduling or my block of flex time along the way. I say to the kids, I'm fully at home on these nights. Yeah, but that doesn't work for me. I have volleyball practice. Okay, so you get, yeah, I'm sorry I can't come to the game or I can't, whatever you're planning, but that's, I scheduled the family in my priority of my weekly schedule. Now we have to navigate that crisis. Next bullet point. Conferences and vacations. So let me talk to a younger among us, Alex. Not that you don't know this, but just to be helpful. If you schedule something you want to do, like a vacation next August, and you're thinking about it now, the benefits of the expectation will serve you well, even more than going on the vacation itself. But if you wait until June, you don't milk that vacation for all it's worth. That's been my experience. Me saying that I'm going to go to a conference next November is already filling me up. It's already doing a work in me that allows me to feel more human, that will navigate the precipice of bitterness that I've been talking about. So back in the day of navigating the beautiful chaos, the brutalness, we'll call it, of local church work. The beauty of that back in the day was that I knew that while I was going to be available as an associate for the senior staff during spring break week, the week after Easter was going to be mine. So don't plan on me. Don't start your leadership training, because I basically know that, and I liked mine 3 times a year, and I would catch 2 weekends and a week in between. So when I have 3 weeks of vacation, etc., let me go to a day off. The very fact that I have 2 replenishing days, Wednesday and Thursday for me, at 9 p.m., I resign from my local church. I'm going to have 24-hour period in which I am off, out. it helped me on Wednesday morning to know that Friday was coming. My day off was coming. That's the benefit. If you can set a schedule and plan it, and the rhythm of it itself has a recharge. The body keeps the score, as we talk about, not just in terms of trauma. But if you ask me to think about church life after 25 years on a Friday or now a Monday, I can't do it because my body has a kind of pathway in which I check out. And violating that has its cost. So that's the beauty of creating a kind of schedule where I can be more fully present in my appointments because they're set. That's what I mean. So conferences and vacations and planning them early, I think have great benefit. And then finally, spiritual retreats. And I'm not going to belabor this, but it was my practice to at least once a year and in the heavier seasons of ministry life twice a year to get away for 2 nights. And there's a kind of way of doing a spiritual retreat that I won't belabor or talk about right now in detail. But to be away for 2 nights, I think 2 nights was critical for me to get away. Can I take someone with me if they can respect your space? To get away, there's a kind of practice that was involved in that, some fasting that was involved, some work that was done, a question that I usually carried with me, and then a practice that to engage along the way that was really helpful. All right, John?
Yeah, can you, I started filling this as you were
Yep.
talking. Can you help me? What day was your sabbatical back in the day?
My Sabbath day,
Your Sabbath day?
Friday.
So Friday was, and did you, okay, so
Yeah.
this all.
Yeah.
This would be Sabbath. We'd call this the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And then your,
Saturday and Sunday just always had its 3 to 4 hour. And then on Sundays, it had its 6-hour days. So
and your 3 nights out were typically Wednesday, Thursday, and then which?
Wednesday, Thursday, and I was also out on Tuesday.
Okay.
Mhm. Working on Tuesday. Yep.
Got it.
But I was definitely not available on Friday, Sunday, and Monday, right? The way you got it.
Right.
And then Saturday I always had in my blocks, and again, I could walk over and grab the folder, but it would have chores would be a third of that day.
Okay.
Another third would be church life, church work, expectations.
Okay.
And then another third would be party. No, I'm just kidding. It would be, watching basketball, basically.
Yeah.
Something like that, or family or whatever it is.
And all these things, you can swap blocks or you can change them.
That's right. This 3-block thing really works for me still. And I've been more vocal about this, though it's still kind of vulnerable to say so. But at almost 64, I find that if there are 3 parts of a day anymore, I can work hard in 2 of them, but not 3 of them, ideally. And so this is swapped up a little bit in terms, I still have there's a lot about this that still resides with my schedule, even though there's been some changes. But one of the adjustments of aging has been something like when you're not sleeping at night. Again, this started to getting in more detail, but started in my 40s after my heart attack, that I found that I was not going to, I could not start at 6 a.m. appointments. It just wasn't working for me. So you got to know your own body and all that. But anymore, I'm finding that if there's 3 parts of a day, I'm the better part of me if I do 2 of them rather than all 3 of them. And when there's all 3 of them, then I need some recovery time on the following day.
Can we open
Yep.
it up?
We're going to open it up. So yeah, thanks
questions.
everybody. And let's turn it over to you as soon as I stop recording.
Yeah, so questions.